I would like to introduce our second speaker of today, Lara El-Tantawy. You might know her project called In the Shadow of the Pyramids, in which she documents the rising tensions in her native Egypt during and before the revolution in Tahrir Square. With this project, she was shortlisted for the Deutsche Börse Photography Award last year. At the booth of Scene 15 here at the fair, you'll see a selection of images from her new project, her new body of work, Beyond Here is Nothing, a photographic meditation on the notion of home. At first sight, when I saw it for the first time in London a few months ago, it looks like a great departure from her earlier series. But in the Unseen magazine, she actually notes that she explains that this new project is the work that she actually wanted to make before the revolution happened. So I hope she will elaborate on both series right now. And please give a warm hand for Lara El-Tantawy. You can click to the right.
Just to move?
Goes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Hi. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here, and thank you for coming to attend. I like to usually address my work in the context of beginnings and endings, because I think it's very reflective of the work as a journey. And the journey has been something very important for me, photographically, but also as a person in my own maturity. And I feel that actually my photography and me as a personality, I hope they go hand in hand. So I hope that when you come across my work, that you actually see something that is reflective maybe of the person, and I don't know if there's any ego in saying that. I hope not. It's not intended that way. But I think I just don't really see any separation between the personal and the photographer. For me, it's the same. And I think it's important to introduce my work that way because it has been very much reflective of my journey as a photographer. Very quickly, I'll just tell you that I started out as a newspaper photographer, so very traditional, conventional platform, but in many ways a really invigorating platform because it allowed me to make pictures in situations where there was nothing to photograph. And I feel like this is something that's really stayed with me. I don't take pictures all the time, but I'm inspired to photograph when I feel that I have something to say. And this is really a thread that goes across all my work. I'm not obsessed with photography, but I photograph when I'm deeply moved by a person, a situation, or a place. My work in the shadow of the pyramids has become a work that, in a way, I think has defined kind of my vision. And I think that's why Anna says the new work is kind of a departure. But in many ways, it's like I say, I feel like the two are actually one. Yes. I'm showing the work in the context of a book, so what you're actually seeing is a flip through the book, which I hope translates well in terms of seeing the images. But it was important for me to show it that way because the book has become a very important way for me to express something about photography, not just as a photographer, but really, again, for me as a journey. Because I feel that what a book does is, a book is something that stays, and it stays with you, and it's something that I can look at many years from now and reflect on where I was at that point of time. Can I pause at some point? Can I? Somebody? Okay, nobody's helping me. Anyhow, so basically this work actually started with a very personal relationship with Egypt. I am Egyptian, but I've lived far away from Egypt for many years. Coming back to Egypt was a place of great tension for me. I lived most of my life outside. I lived in the UK, I lived in America, I lived in Saudi Arabia. So there's always been transitions between where I am and this sense of always searching for a sense of belonging. So going back to Egypt in 2005 was around the time where my maternal grandmother had unexpectedly passed away. And it was a point where I felt like I really wanted to reconnect with my own country. So I really went back with no particular intention except to make photographs. And the camera became a tool for me to express something and actually lash out my emotions in terms of death, because death is so sudden. It hits you by surprise, and it leaves so many things unsaid, so many emotions, so many gaps that you have to fill emotionally and make up for. And my camera, in a way, became my way to reconnect and to express those emotions in a way that I couldn't really articulate in words. So I really just went out and started making photographs on the streets. I think it would be appropriate to say that I never really expected the work to become what it has become. I'm very proud of the fact that it's a work that when people mention my name, they mention the work, because it's a work that comes from a place of honesty and a place of great vulnerability for me, and a place also of a time of my life that I will always remember. So I'm happy that that happened, but it was really never intended that way. It's a work that I basically did to try to reconnect with my home. And then, of course, the revolution happened in 2011, and the work gained a sense of urgency for me where I felt like this is actually the story of my generation. I have to keep photographing. So it really took on a different dimension. And the book that I'm showing is a book that I published in 2015. I don't know what just happened. It's not supposed to do that. Yeah, I just want this to go, just to run. I'll leave it. It's a book that very much draws a parallel between what was happening in Egypt, the general story of the chaos that was happening on the street, and my own childhood memories and my connection with Egypt. So the book is designed to kind of look like a journey. It was actually designed by a designer here in Holland, Sibrin, and it was printed in Holland. So I'm really happy that I'm getting to talk about this work here. And basically, it's a book where the memories kind of intersperse the chaos of what's happening on the streets, which is very true to my relationship with what was happening in Egypt at the time. I created the book as a self-published book in an edition of 500, so it's a very, very small edition. And the reason I actually did that was because, again, it was a book really an expression of my own relationship with Egypt, and I really didn't think there would be too many people interested in what I have to say about Egypt. So it's, I'm quite happy that people relate to the work on some emotional level. I think it's a work also where, again, the idea of the journey as a photographer, it's a work where I found that I have something to say that I'm really passionate about, and I think this has become really important for me. This idea of trying to connect, I don't feel like I photograph stories or issues or something really big about the world. I feel like I photograph something that is deeply moving to me and reflective of where I am in my particular journey in the world right now. And so this book was in many ways the beginning of the journey. I had been photographing for about maybe 8 years up until that point. And I think for me it defines a beginning because finally I felt like I know what I want to say. And I'm just gonna let this run for a bit, if you don't mind. It's basically the whole thing is 4 minutes, so it's not gonna take that long. And then I'll move on to what I did after that, which is basically transferring the book or making a newspaper edition out of the book because I wanted something to reach an Egyptian audience, because this book couldn't reach an Egyptian audience because of the number of copies, but also the price value on it. So this is almost ending. I feel like I should also say that I've talked about this work so much that I feel like I don't really know what to say about it anymore. So if you have questions afterwards, I'm really happy to receive questions. I find that questions always challenge me and stimulate me in a way that I hadn't thought. But I was engaged with this work for about 10 years, and I've been talking about it now for, maybe an extra 3 or 4 years. So I feel like, in a way, not that I'm detached from it, it's very dear to my heart, but I'm not entirely sure what to say about it anymore. And again, because it wasn't intended to be something that I would ever be talking about here at Unseen. It was intended as a very personal memoir, in a way, something that my kids can engage with, and maybe my grandkids and my nephews and nieces for their own memory in the future. So this is about to end, but just to give you a heads up about what's to follow. So what's going to come next is, again, a flip through the other publication I did after that, which I like to think of it as more of a street edition of the book. And no, it's called The People. So anyhow, it's a newspaper edition, and I think the newspaper edition actually worked quite well as a translation of the work, because in many ways it references Egypt historically. Egypt was one of the first places in the Middle East to come out with a newspaper, and obviously it references the revolution in a way as well. And it became something for me where it allowed me to re-engage with the images again, which I had become incredibly familiar with over 10 years, and basically reopen and renegotiate my relationship with the images and what I want to say with the work to a completely different audience. So it's something that I give out for free to Egyptians everywhere that I meet. Because I think for me it's intended as something that celebrates and memorializes the revolution, which maybe many of you know has been completely taken out of context with what's happening in Egypt right now. It's been something that the government right now is trying to eliminate from our schools and from our history. Students are not allowed to be taught about the revolution in books. It's actually being eliminated. Names of people who played a key role in the revolution are actually being removed from textbooks. So for me, this is something that I feel really proud to share with Egyptians as something that celebrates a very important chapter in our life. And again, as a document, in many ways engages with the idea of chaos and the kind of sense of confusion that was happening around the revolution. For me personally. Can I now go to Beyond Here's Nothing, please? Beyond Here's Nothing. Yes, thank you. So this is my most recent work, and in doing this work, actually, I've come to realize that photography for me is something that I actually always knew, but I think I maybe forgot about it at some point. That photography for me is something that is really about expression. It's an artistic form of expression, of saying something that is purely personal, but it's also, photography is about the possibility and the possibility of sharing an experience or an idea with somebody. So Beyond Here is Nothing is my recent work, and it's a body of work that actually, it comes after the revolution, because in many ways the revolution, it wasn't easy to photograph, but there was always something to photograph around the revolution. You could look around every corner and there's something happening. So I really wanted to take a step back and re-engage with photography as a way where there's absolutely nothing happening around me, but there's something that stimulates me to photograph. So it's a body of work that is a meditation on home. It comes as, I see my work as chapters, and as really chapters in my own journey, in my life. And it developed organically, because after the end of my work in Egypt, I realized that Egypt is my home. It's a place I'm always going to identify with as my home, but I actually don't necessarily want to live there, because I have fundamental differences with politics, and a lot of things that are there. So in this sense, the idea of home became something that I really started to negotiate, and I wasn't really sure what to make of it. I was born in the UK, I live there now, but I'm Egyptian by heritage, my parents are there. So for me, home was always a very abstract concept, something that I always was trying to search for and relate to, but could never really quite find. And this is really sort of what the work is reflecting on. And the book is kind of designed as, it's not 3 chapters really, but it's a book that reveals itself as a journey. So the idea of a journey is very much referenced in the book. And it's a book, I think, that some people really love, but some people really hate, because they find this idea very gimmicky and they don't really engage with it on that level. But for me, it's very true to the way that I wanted to express the book and have an audience engage with it. And I think it's a book that forces you to go on this idea of a journey and take it slow. It's a book that you have to sit down with and, kind of flip through the pages. And it's either something that it's a journey that you either want to continue going on, or it's a journey that you just really don't want to engage with at all. So the images have been taken, they're all taken on my phone. And I think this is important, but maybe not so important. I think it's important because the phone lends itself to, it's always in your pocket. It's something that's really accessible. But I think, again, it was just much lighter. And I mean that metaphorically speaking as well. I didn't have to engage with my camera. It's a heavy, heavy weight, and it's something that I always had to negotiate. Whereas my phone just made it so much easier and allowed me to actually really focus on the emotion that I was kind of trying to convey through the images. So this is the work that's on show here. It's a work that's kind of difficult for me also to talk about, because it addresses issues of loneliness and a sense of ruthlessness and really trying to connect when you don't connect. I feel more at ease talking about it now, but in the beginning, especially when I had to talk about ideas of loneliness, I felt incredibly vulnerable. But actually in talking about it, there's again this idea of photography as a possibility, that actually it's a very common human feeling that we all have to negotiate at one point or another. And I find that when people engage with the work and really get into it, they understand or they feel these underlined emotions in the work. And for me, this is the greatest gift that I feel I can convey through my work, is that somebody will actually relate to it at some level, especially that it's work that, again, it's not like Adam's work where they're doing something really big about a very important issue that's affecting the world right now. It's something that's very personal and, maybe not so many people will relate to it. So if you guys have questions, I don't know how I'm doing on time. Thank you.
Right now I would like to introduce our third and last speaker. We're very happy to welcome Nadav Kander, standing here next to me. Again, I think his work doesn't really need an introduction anymore. He exhibited his portraits and landscapes in exhibitions around the world, and he is perhaps best known for his series about the Yangtze River in China, for which he earned the Prix Pictet in 2009. At Unseen, he's showing his recent work at the booth of Flowers Gallery, so I warmly invite you to go and see his work over there. And we feel very honored to also have him here at Unseen this year as a coach for the Unseen ING Talent Award. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Nadav Kander to talk a bit about 2 series of his work.
Thank you very much. I'm just getting those. That's cool. I feel like you must need a break. It's getting intense. This is off. Got it. With this way, okay. Yeah. And then to change, I do that. Okay. Oh, thank you. So just to give you a bit of a break, is Adam still here? Are you still here, Adam? I've got to tell you something. You can probably hear from my accent that it's slightly similar to him, but we both grew up in South Africa. And once, actually at Unseen, not in this room, at another room when we gave a talk again together in the same session, he walked over to me and he said, you know, we've known each other for a while now, but tell me something. Did you grow up in Johannesburg? And I said, yes. And he said, did you grow up in Bramley? I said, yeah, I did. He said, what road? I said, Linden Road. He said, what number? I said, 76. He said, you won't believe it. My mother called me, said she saw your surname. My mother said that she sold my house to your parents. So I was about 12 and I moved in. He was 5 and moved out, something like that. He's younger than me. We had the same bedroom. That view out of that window is the same. It's unbelievable. And then tonight he's talking about abstraction, which is very dear to my heart. Go figure that. That's amazing. But I'm using my time up, but you needed to relax, I think. Right, so I've got... Okay, what I don't have on this computer, Anne, is my words.
They're not opening?
Ah, there we go. That's it. I need that badly because I have notes rather than a talk, and I kind of need to look at them a lot. So I'm going to talk to you about my new work as well as dig a bit into portraiture, because I work on one body at a time, and they seem to always take 2 years. And as you know, I make portraits, and I usually intersperse the bigger projects by taking portraits at any time. But really the meaning or significance of a photograph emerges, in my opinion, from the meeting between information on a print, let's say, and your thoughts, or better still, your feelings in your mind or your body when you look at something like that. And if you agree, if this holds true for you, you've got to agree that then I can't explain my pictures to you. My process, that was not me. My process, yes, not much more. The understanding that the human condition or emotional place humans go when they are being true to themselves is what we seek, or I definitely seek, in myself and in art. What is also so interesting to me is that these human conditions like vulnerability or calmness or compassion, each person here recognizes in another person. So although we feel or we think that we are so individual, and we are individuals in some respect, we also have so many things in common. And portraiture, or my portraiture, really delves into this, as well as my landscape work, which tries to let these feelings rise and rise in you. So when a person sees a portrait that they think is good, they may see a reference to the light of Jan Hals or Judas Leicester, both Dutch. But on another level, it may be the emotion you see in a picture that you recognize. And you only recognize that emotion because you know it in yourself. And portraiture works like that. So now I've got to click something and click here, right? Okay, and click. This is very recent. It's Julian Assange. So when I talk about emotions, after all, we are all just a bundle of emotions. We wake up in the morning, we feel an emotion. How do we feel? We have a coffee, we feel different, and so on through the day. So I'll get to my new project, but let's just stay here for a minute. When I was photographing the great writer Ian McEwan, and directing him, look this way, look that way, moving him, whatever I do. After a while, he looked at me and he said, tell me, Nadav, what is it that you pursue? And I've thought so much about that. It's such a clear question, and it's so revealing to answer if you answer truthfully. And try it sometimes. What is it that you pursue? When I photograph people, I direct them, as I said, to look here or there, and I change the light. Sometimes something else, maybe it's positioning. And I'm looking for that blissful moment when I look at a person, for a time where, for instance, the heaviness of the light comes from the right direction, the person's gesture is right, and suddenly the picture is working. It's come together. And you see a character of humanness. And for me, that needs to be quite calm. It's often about melancholy. It's often about vulnerability. Put another way, a person brings everything that they have that's happened to them all their life, from that bedroom, Adam's bedroom, right forward. And I do the same. So the sitter and me. And we come and we put that into a pot and we stir it and we heat it up until I like how it tastes. It's quite a good analogy. When I show you a picture, you see and unravel it for yourself. So a picture of a person or any picture can be a mirror for tapping into your own story. All that I have said, I think, applies to all of my projects, portraits, anything I do. And portraits, in a way, are a great way of me keeping my practice quite sharp. Where are we? There's so much I can tell you about celebrity or not, but we've got 15 minutes. And a lot of my portraits are not about celebrity. And I think the last one is Tracy Emin. And it's funny, I could have just started with The Dark Line, which is my latest project, but I don't know, I somehow wanted to bring you portraits because in a way, mankind is what underpins all of my work. So I always feel that the portraiture is so central to it. And here, I wrote all of this on the train coming here, so I'm sorry, this isn't a talk, it's really notes that I have. So Dark Line, the Thames Estuary, is my latest body of work, due to be exhibited at Flowers in London on the 16th or 17th of November, and it runs through till January. It's a work that may have no end, as it's my local river, and I really hope to return to it for a long time. I know one day I'll just suddenly not see it clearly, and that'll be the end, but the same way as China was after 6 or 7 trips to China. So the Yangtze River project, which I've just mentioned, 10 years ago, was photographed really in the large format tradition of landscape photography, quite Germanic in its way. And in 2015, I visited the Thames Estuary and found the bleak and flat landscape had such a positive influence on me to move on and make work in a really different way. So it's a river that is ending its journey. It flattens out as it gets dissolved into the sea. On one hand, it makes me think of inevitability, but as well it conjures up feelings of destiny and of voyage. After all, it was here that the opening pages of Conrad's Heart of Darkness were set. So since then, I've visited my local estuary 8 times or more. I started in 2015, I think I said. I found myself dialing down the ultra-realism of photography and of large format photography. Dialing down, what does that mean, dialing down? I suppose I want to move away from the common perception that photographs are the result of a lens that focuses sharply on what's in front of it, what happened to inner landscape. I also work slowly, which echoes the pace of the river, and I really take my time beforehand, and I take ages printing to really bring out nuance, color, texture, darkness. I sometimes double print. I sometimes print first in the darkroom before blowing these pictures up that are quite large. I suppose I don't stop until I feel until I feel unfolded, I suppose, until I feel like everything of me that I can make in this print is there. And for that reason, a digital darkroom becomes very important to me. I feel that in the past, maybe when I would photograph on negative and print in a darkroom, it might be like me writing an essay in a funny way, in a very strong way, actually, not a funny way. I feel when I work on a screen that often, and I work in exactly the same way as a darkroom with the same sensibilities, but in a way that I can now write poetry with it if I can big myself up that much. So I was attracted to this place for a few reasons, as you can hear. Slow-moving dark water has always had an effect on me, and I'm attracted to its grace, its power. And when I look into dark water, it feels like it's a barrier between me and the unknown. This is when I wish we could just turn this screen sideways. The ideas and philosophy that interest me occur and reoccur in all of my work. So this upright format might surprise you. And for this work, well, it comes from me measuring quite a few sanshui scrolls. These Chinese paintings, sanshui meaning mountain and river, by the way, show immeasurable distance, forms disappearing into the mist. There's often abstract shapes that add to distance. And the upright format of the scroll brings heaven and earth together. Very important to the sanshui scroll is that humans are but tiny aspects in the huge cosmos. Du Fu, the influential Chinese poet, wrote in 750, "The nation may shatter, but the mountains and the rivers remain." I'm operating two things here. This is the one that is hanging at Flowers. I don't know if you've walked around yet. But my attraction is really not nature-driven. It's man's relationship with inevitability and the Thames as a place of human history. One of the busiest places on earth during the British Empire. Great expeditions, voyages left the estuary. Thousands of ships were docked there every day for trade. Wars have been fought, ships sunk. It's really been shaped by toil and grit. And many of these foreign people settled in England, making England the very diverse population that I wish was more celebrated. This liquid history is unmatched by any other river. But the water holds no memory. It's moved on. You have to look up to the horizon to reflect on the past. To reflect on the past. So though I've talked a lot, I want these pictures just to grab you in your gut. Feel quiet or see terror. Hopefully my words just add a layer. You can't see that. I don't think these will ever project properly. Thank you. And bang on, 15 minutes and 53 seconds is the last slide. Oh, I haven't moved it. Is the last slide, which is an install pictures at the Flowers booth at Photo London. And as you can see, or maybe you can't, but each of these pictures are almost exactly my height. And that bodily response to these pictures hung low on a wall is also really important to me. So I thank you very, very much. Oh, if there's a question, I'm very, very happy for that. Thank you, Alana.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, I'm just interested, thank you so much for showing us your new work. Obviously, the Yangtze River and Into the Dust really strike me as about storytelling. They're a reflection of ecological devastation, of a socio-political change, and it seems that you've kind of gone down this, you've talked about your kind of attraction to abstraction, but I wonder what it is about storytelling that you feel perhaps no longer does the trick. Is there a futility in storytelling that you feel that it no longer, I don't know, but I'm just intrigued to think what your reflections are on that.
It's a great question. I think that all through any talk I ever gave on the Yangtze River project, I would always say that I never set out to document. I set out to go to China because I wanted to feel what it was like to be Chinese in this time, or to be in China at a time that was moving at a pace that was so unnatural, 2006 and 2007. But any group of pictures that gets grouped together of a place, as in the news, as a place like China, becomes document. And as for storytelling, I don't know. I don't know if I've ever been. I don't know. Did Rothko tell stories? I'm not.
Not necessarily a story, but there's a chronicle and there's a journey, in the estuary works. And I love the fact that you're making work in the UK.
Yeah.
I hope we've talked about that. But there is. It seems to me that some of your earlier work are dealing with very concrete political dimensions that affect our contemporary and everyday life. And here it's just more of an internalization.
It is much more. I believe that we live in a city that is so watery, although we don't interact with the water. But the amount of history that has happened is really in the subconscious, I think, of Londoners. And I don't think I would be photographing the estuary if it wasn't for that. The history, the grit and toil that has happened, what has happened along those shores is unbelievable and really sits on my shoulders while I contemplate that river. So although I'm not showing the landmarks and trying to tell story in that way, I'm really trying to move people with abstraction and trying to really dive behind the camera rather than so much in front always. Although craft, of course, comes very much into these pictures too. They are printed and printed and printed. Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much.